The appropriate wood selection is kind of key to all of your work. I mostly work in hardwood. And the reason I work in hardwood is because it is prettier and it has more durability. And the sawdust doesn't seem to get airborne quite as easily. That stuff is heavy. You know, hardwood is a little heavier than softwood. Not only is it pretty, but you don't really have to put a stain on it. You know, I kind of abhor staining. I just like a clear coat. If I want darker wood, I'll just use a darker wood. Staining is really no benefit except for making cheap wood look worse. It's really of no benefit. Now, if you have a gel stain, dark, and you already have a dark wood, now then you're working on some progress, because you can get towards ebony, and you can ebonize certain woods. You can ebonize hardwoods. I think there's a recipe online. I haven't done it yet, so somebody will tell me. You can stress it. Like, for instance, this is pretty stressed in these little areas where I have this butterfly, and this is all just kind of taking the stress of these. When you pull on this, this is acting like one single board all the way across, because there's so many ties on this. And if this was hardwood, I believe you'd get some flex in that. But the hardwood is so rigid because of its microstructure. All of these hardwoods, almost all of them have corresponding veneer. This is the veneer that, this has a finish on it, so it doesn't quite look the same color, but this is exactly the same kind of wood as this. This is a crotch. It's got a big hole in it where there was a bark pocket. If you have one hardwood, you need the matching veneer. What is your steps towards, you'll just start off with hardwood. I would suggest starting off with softwood. It is cheap. You can get 2x4s, that's softwood. Home Depot, there's all kinds of resources for softwood. Softwood's cheap and readily available. Hardwood is, by its name, hard. The black walnut and the walnut in general is not, in general use, you won't mark it when you're using it as a table or a countertop. You can mark it. You can lay a tin can on it that's wet, and it'll cause a black ring. But you can sand that right off, and you can go about your business with a little bit more finish. Softwood is soft, and it's got its place. There are idiosyncrasies with hardwood. You always have to pre-drill a screw hole with hardwood. Softwood, you don't have to pre-drill. You can just screw right into that. And hardwood, each one has its own idiosyncrasies. For instance, I can't work with cocoa bolo or with ebony because it gives me kind of an asthmatic thing. So each one of these hardwoods has its potential to be an allergen for you. That might be a good reason to start slow and don't jump off into buying a whole bunch of, say, cocoa bolo or something that might be an allergen for obvious reasons. Yeah, cost is a factor. Walnut is going to be a premium price, and I prefer to get it at about a 3.5-inch thick slab. I don't know where I could buy that, so I have to cut my own. The reason for that is these things change in shape when they dry, and if you don't get a thick enough slab, you won't have a tabletop at the end. No matter who dries it, they all move a significant amount. And the availability kind of sets the price. On the West Coast, Claro walnut is not very available. It's only found in people's backyards and rarely in nature. And in nature, I mean maybe an Indian reservation or a protected forestry service or somewhere around in there. And so you can't get a permission to cut it on those two places, but in somebody's backyard, some people will pay you to get rid of it, you know. But that's rare. Most of the time, you'll find guys that are tree hunters, and they'll be the ones that'll find these, and when they find somebody that is willing to buy it, then that day they'll harvest it. they'll have an agreement with the homeowner or something, and pay them $500 for the tree, sell it to me for a lot more. So oak you can get readily. It's real easy to get. It's really heavy. It seems like it's 30% heavier than walnut, even when it's dry. And it's more brittle. It's pretty, not as pretty as walnut. And it has a lot more defects, and so you'll be doing a lot more fill work. And it's not as sellable. If you're looking for something that you can sell, a walnut's always more sellable. It's more user-friendly. Maple's a hardwood. That's another good one. Still not as valuable as black walnut or walnut, but maple, you can get some amazing pieces. In fact, I bought 2 maple logs out of Oregon this spring, and those are sitting on the lumber stack right now drying. In 3.5 years, I'll get to use them. And there's one was a cluster log. It was about 35 inches wide, and that is a bunch of burl on one side it had. So we slabbed all that out. It's going to look amazing, but still. Maple will dry a little faster than walnut because it's not as quite the big leaf maple that we have on our coast. Softwood is for doing trim work around houses and for maybe some millwork where you have interesting decorative carvings, someplace that's not going to get touched. Maybe it's going to get painted. Those are uses for softwood. Door trims, and you can have paneling made of softwood like knotty pine and knotty pine cabinets and all of that. And those look great in the appropriate place in their day, but that's not a thing I would do now. You can change the shape of the board. If it warps after it's dry, if it cups, like after it's dry, you can flip hardwood over on a flat surface and wet the other side, and it'll eventually go flat again. Big boards like that, even 3.5 inches thick. It takes time. I mean, it takes heat, but you have to pay attention to it, and you may have to put some weight on it. But just 1 or 2 wettings will make that sucker flatten out again. Softwood, I suppose you could do that with softwood too. Softwood dries really fast, so it's really good for chicken coops and rabbit hutches and dog houses and stuff. But inside the house where it's going to get a lot of use, it's going to get beat up. Every time you touch it with your fingernail, you're going to get a mark. You're going to see your kids writing their name in it. If that's what you want, it'll be a memento. Please do it. But that's not for everyone. And that's why we don't use redwood except outside. Yeah, outside redwood's really good picnic table because it's resistant to rot. But termites do eat it. I have a piece of redwood right here I just picked off of my woodyard lot for a bench. If you like the videos, please subscribe. It helps me do more videos and bring more content to more users. Thank you. Not much use for green wood in woodworking, except maybe in wood turning, at least not uses that I'm familiar with. You can build a house with green wood. Most of the 2x4s you get, a lot of them are green. You can feel the water in them. And sometimes when you're cutting them, you see the water spray when you're cutting them. So I've had some really green 2x4s. It doesn't seem to matter. Wood doesn't really shrink in this direction. It only shrinks sideways. Out of 2x4, 8 foot long, maybe you're going to lose a 1/4 inch after it dries. It's just that those straws are arranged this way. And when they collapse sideways. They don't collapse in the linear form. Greenwood's still full of water. It has just come from growing somewhere, and it's been sliced into the appropriate dimensions, and you want to use it, but it's green. You can. 2x4s, yeah, they use it all the time building houses. Sapwood from any species is what's on the edge of the tree. This is a real good area of sapwood right here. You can see it. So this is the sapwood. That's the heartwood. The sapwood is slightly softer than the heartwood on walnut. It's probably slightly softer than almost all of its heartwood. So Maple sapwood's probably softer than the maple. Pine sapwood is softer than the pine. Almost always a different color, a lighter color than the heartwood, except on pine. And it can be, it has a lot of variations. That's where the bugs like to eat, because this is a newer wood than this old wood down here, and it's more full of the sugars. That's where the powder post beetle and the termites will hit first. You can see the termites hit sapwood. This is sapwood right along here, but it's almost the same color as the heartwood on this particular tree. You just, black walnut. You can barely see some light color here in the sapwood, but it kind of extends down to about here. Plywood is not always made of softwood. I buy hard Baltic birch plywood that's made in Siberia sometimes. But there's other hardwoods, and they just cost a bit more. You know, more layers means more stability. I usually use 3/4 inch and 1/2 inch for the veneer work that I do. And you use plywood because you can't put veneer on hardwood. You can put it on hardwood veneer, hardwood plywood, but you can't put it on hardwood boards. These boards, they move. See, I glued that together with resin and coffee maybe a year ago. This has moved since the day I filled it and sanded it. And I'll put the lipstick on these tables one more time before people get them. And usually that's the last time they have to be patched, because these tables are outside. My shop has open doors, and sometimes I don't even close the door at night. Sometimes my dogs sleep in here and they mill around. So all of the pieces I have here, I have to redo before they go to a customer. That makes more work for me, but what I do is I put the first coat of finish of oil on these to protect them, and then they just sit. The final coat goes on before they get delivered. It's not a good idea to put veneer over a board, because these boards move this way. Like I said, they don't move this way, they move this way. And that's why when you bolt them down, you need to have great big holes when you bolt them down, and don't bolt them down very tight. Let them move, because the weakest thing is going to go. And if it means your table's going to go, your tabletop could split if you bolt it down too tight. It's all kinds of plywood. I use a 1/4 inch for backs of work. And sometimes I'll put veneer on the back too. It's just according to if the piece is going to be seen from 360. That's a lot of extra work, but it's nice to have a piece that'll sit in the center of the room instead of have to be hugging a wall. If you're going to do veneer work, you can't use plywood that you get at Home Depot. It's not good enough. I've tried. It doesn't work out. And it doesn't stay flat. And it's not really good for carcass work either, for making the carcass of your casework. It's really, could look flat when you get it, but it's really hard to keep it flat because it's not always 100% dry. I mean, it may be, but it may not be. And you really have to get the better hardwood plywood if you're going to put veneer on it. And it pays off. It stays flat. And no, don't get me wrong, you can screw that up too. You can store these hardwood plywoods up against a wall like that, and it'll just take a shape. So once you get it in your shop, you have to lay it flat or put it next to something else that's really flat. And if you just lay it on the edge like this and store it for 6 months in the weather, it'll eventually get a curve like that, and it'll be unusable for flat surfaces except for small pieces. And I do use them for small pieces from time to time, but you need to buy your plywood just before you make your item. And I say that with a smile because there is something about seasoning the plywood inside your shop. But inside my shop isn't always like inside someone's house. So I like to get it in, use it while it's flat, and get the product out while it's flat. And let it adjust to the new customer's house. I don't do a lot of casework in advance for that reason, because things happen. Start with a handsaw. You can't go wrong starting with the basics. You really only need a handsaw and a screwdriver. You're going to be there a long time. Everything is a step above that. So there's no stopping you if you want to start. I started with my grandfather's saw. It's a push saw. And I mean push because it cuts on the push. The Japanese saws are pull saws. They cut on the pull. And those I've hurt myself with a lot. So probably you're going to start with a skill saw. I have spider webs and gnats today. You're probably going to start with a skill saw. And if you can, start with a track saw. That is probably one of the first tools I would buy if I was you. A track saw, any kind of track saw is better than just a skill saw. But if you only have a skill saw, you can put a straight edge and cut next to the straight edge, but it won't stay on the straight edge unless you make it stay there. On a track saw, it'll make a straight line. That's the difference. A track saw can kind of take the place of a table saw. If I had the opportunity to not have a table saw or a track saw, I would not have the table saw. Then after saying that, I would be a lot slower because a table saw is a lot faster than a track saw when you're cutting multiple items. And it already is incremented so that you can get exactly the size you want. It's a lot better to have a table saw. But for money-wise and room, a track saw is the first tool. You'll always use it, even if you have a table saw.